So, The Realities of Becoming a Full-Time Writer by Max Booth III with LitReactor. Again, a great source for information about writing and writing craft. Longtime readers of my previous LitReactor articles or Twitter account will recognize me as the guy who often complains about his terrible hotel job. For 8 years, I was employed as the night auditor for a hotel located somewhere in central Texas. Night auditors are the guys that run the front desk at night at hotels. They also have a number of other responsibilities, the normal ones including sort of tracking all the paperwork from that day. But then, as time has gone on, sometimes, and especially here in the pandemic, they've gotten more and more nighttime tasks as staff in hotels have kind of dropped down. And that may be part of what pushed him to quit that job. In my novel, The Nightly Disease, I consider that one of the greatest novels ever written. And if you can pick that up from Max Booth III, you'll be, well, I love it. I don't know that every person's going to love it, but I consider it a great transgressive novel. I referred to the hotel simply as the GD Hotel. In reality, I will never reveal its true name, so don't ask. If you go to this article and click on this link here, it'll take you to the Twitter thread that he did an Ask Me Anything on his last night at the hotel, and it's pretty hilarious. He's quite irreverent, and it makes for very good, interesting reading. And especially in that sort of desperate moment of his last shift there at this hotel that kind of drove him crazy all those years. In my time at the hotel, I was attacked, robbed, and thoroughly screamed at to the point of tears. Guests called me useless. Guests called me fat. Guests called me uneducated. Guests threw things at me. Guests vomited on me. Guests complained that I wasn't plunging their toilets fast enough. Guests spit on me. Guests pushed me. Guests tackled me. Guests cried on my shoulder. Guests told me their deepest secrets. Guests had nervous breakdowns in my lobby. Guests begged for my life advice. Guests opened their souls to me. It was a very weird job. I couldn't have put up with half of what he did. And he used to have a Facebook group for night auditors and was constantly sharing stories about things that were going on at the hotel. It was completely insane. I started out making $9 an hour. 3 years later, I managed to inch up to $10. Then my general manager quit and took half the staff with him to a new hotel, including our assistant manager, leaving the hotel without any management whatsoever. He offered me a position too, but the payment wouldn't have been worth the new drive time, so I declined. Then I got a very stupid idea. I called one of the hotel's owners and informed them I'd also been offered a position at this other hotel, and unless they could match the payment my ex-GM was willing to give me, I would quit immediately. Reminder, I had already declined the position at the time of this phone call. In reality, my ex-GM had offered me $11 to join him at his new hotel. I told the owners he offered me $12. The next day, they called me back and agreed to up my hourly pay to $12. By 2019, I was making $12.75, which was the payment cap listed for my position. I would never be able to earn a raise again. Sorry, but that's the maximum night audit is allowed to make, said the people who had created this fictional cap in the first place. All right. Then a pandemic happened and they laid off half our staff. I stayed on but was expected to start doing the duties of those who had been furloughed for no extra payment. They realized they no longer needed a laundry person when they could just make the night auditor do it. They could also let go of the kitchen person and just had me prepare breakfast for the hotel over 50% capacity. Then, when I couldn't complete every goal expected of me, I was called useless by management. When I suggested certain safety protocols be set in place to avoid unnecessary COVID spread, I was laughed at behind my back. And last August, when I finally had enough and turned in my 2 weeks, my general manager laughed with my other coworkers and jokingly said, "Ha ha, Max is afraid of COVID." This person who said this is the same woman who invited her elderly mother to drive across the state last July when COVID was arguably at its strongest and took her out for a manicure. So he quit, it looks like in August or either the beginning of September, and so October, November, December, January, about 4 months ago. So he's been full-time about 4 months now. It was bad enough to deal with COVID deniers who were guests, but what was the point of trying to ask them to follow restrictions when even our management thought it was all BS? What was the point of trying to do anything when the person who assigned the duties didn't respect you and routinely called you useless behind your back? So yeah, in August I talked to my significant other about my frustrations, and we decided after 8 years there I should resign and attempt to make a living as a full-time writer. If I could actually do this seemed uncertain, but it was something we wouldn't be able to figure out until I tried. The hotel had swallowed all my free time. Even when I wasn't at work, I felt grumpy and desolate. I was full of dread every day, even on my nights off, because I knew I would eventually return. Then I turned in my 2 weeks' notice, and the feeling of hopelessness slowly started lifting. I was replaced with the stress over whether or not I'd be able to collect enough freelance writing and editing gigs, or if my books would earn enough royalties, or if people would continue supporting my Patreon. But it wasn't as soul-crushing as the previous feeling. With the hotel, it didn't seem to matter how hard I worked. I felt trapped forever. But with working as a full-time writer, there was a sense of control. I would be doing things I'd been fantasizing about doing for a living my entire life, something I never actually thought would be possible. As I feared, I would grow old behind the front desk, never escaping, until eventually keeled over and died in the effing lobby. I could imagine some D-head guest coming down and kicking my corpse and complaining about their toilet not flushing. Oh, that's funny. All right. In the background of all this, there was some interest in a screenplay I wrote, which was an adaptation of my novella, We Need to Do Something. We had a couple production companies interested and even some cast members, but what we didn't have was any money, so I tried my best to convince myself it probably wasn't going to happen. So many movies almost happen and then disappear before everything can fall into place. We Need to Do Something is a really brutal novella. So in terms of just extreme horror, it's about a family trapped in a bathroom after a tornado, and it's probably one of the most brutal works I've ever read from him, maybe from anybody. And he wrote the screenplay for it, and the company actually made it. And Josh Malerman was involved, sort of some of the production stuff that he's involved in now. That's the author of Mallory and Bird Box and those books. So real big deal, and I'm very, very proud of him. It's a huge accomplishment. All right. Then exactly 1 week after I turned in my 2 weeks' notice, my film and TV manager, Ryan Lewis, called and informed me we had received full financing and we'd begin filming at the end of September. We wrapped at the end of October and are currently in post-production. Typically, you aren't paid for a movie until day one of filming, so for them to start so soon, that was a real game changer. After taxes, I received a little over what I would have made in 1 year at the hotel. Suddenly, the immense stress I was feeling about whether or not I'd be able to pay my bills by freelance writing, editing shrunk. It didn't disappear, and it still hasn't, but it certainly didn't feel as overwhelming as it did the previous week when I turned in my resignation. Again, very proud of him. He is an excellent author, and I've been touting his work for a long time, so in some sense, this was inevitable in terms of the quality of his writing, the initiative he took in writing the screenplays, but then also the hustle he put into getting things out there and making connections and making things happen. Max Booth III put in the work to get to where he is now and to where he's going to end up in the future. And again, just very impressed, very proud with what he did. When I went full-time back in 2013, I really had no excuse to believe that I could do it either. And I didn't get a big financial windfall from any of my work for a while. So I really was grinding out work for quite some time. All right, continuing on. The morning of September 1st, 2020, I left the hotel with the intention of never returning. I got home, napped for a couple hours, woke up around noon, and thought, okay, what now? The thing they don't tell you about quitting a terrible and frankly abusive long-term job is it doesn't feel like you actually quit. The first week feels like a long vacation that you had to beg your boss to approve. The dread builds and builds, tricking your brain into thinking any day now it'll be time to clock back in. Even now, heading toward the end of January, it doesn't quite feel like I permanently quit. Last night, somebody called me and I instinctively answered the phone by saying, "This is the front desk, how can I help you?" I realized what I did, panicked, and quickly hung up. Then I shot my phone with a gun just to be safe. After I quit my day job, I had dreams every single night about going back to teaching. And as time went on, mostly those dreams were in the dreams I was going back to teaching and quitting again, going back to teaching and quitting again. So like the backstory of my dream somehow was that occasionally I would teach for a year, then take years off to write, and then go back and teach for a year. And every time I went back, I felt like, oh, I should. What did I even bother coming back for? And always regretted coming back into the classroom and that sort of thing. So these are just these constant dreams, and of course having dreams of like being around students and not having them listen and everything. Those dreams continued for months and months, maybe more than a year, every single night, and eventually they became more sporadic. But even in like recent years, I will occasionally have a teaching dream still. All right, continuing with Max's story. After quitting, it took about a week and a half before I fully adapted to a new sleep schedule. Before the hotel, I worked a year stocking at Walmart on the night shift. So in total, I worked midnights for 9 straight effing years. That is a long time to sleep like a vampire. Working on a nocturnal schedule for any length of time is going to cause damage. But almost a decade, it will rewire your brain and scramble everything into chaos. Several months since I left the hotel, I now find my ability to concentrate on tasks sharpening. Short-term memory issues that had sincerely worried me were starting to improve. I'm finding it easier to work on creative projects without losing track of my goals. I'm no longer so grumpy all the time. I actually want to wake up now, which is something I used to dread more than anything. I also really look forward to socializing with friends and doing live events again whenever it's safe to do that. I used to work night shift at Waffle House when I was sort of between high school and college, and I never adapted well to night shift. Like I was just not made for it, and never did well on it. All right, continuing with Max. I realize you probably didn't click this article to read what is essentially a blog post about how my life has been unexpectedly working out lately. Maybe you are also someone who recently gambled on trying to make a living as a full-time writer and you were hoping for some advice. That is fair. I can tell you how I've been trying to make it work, but before I get into that, I have to remind you much of my freelancer stress has been temporarily relieved due to the money I received from writing the We Need to Do Something screenplay. Without that paycheck, this article would probably be a bit more depressing. So with that said, if you're thinking about writing full time, it would be wise to maintain a schedule. All right, let's read what he has to say about schedules. One of the most important things about being a full-time writer is trying to maintain a schedule, especially during COVID times. It's very easy to doom scroll on social media all day or binge some mediocre streamer. Maybe I'm the mediocre streamer that you could be binging. Figure out what schedule makes you most productive without killing yourself and try to stick to it. And if you fail once in a while, don't beat yourself up too much about it. Otherwise, if you're anything like me, you'll just end up spiraling into a hole of self-doubt and depression. I still haven't quite figured out the perfect schedule, and that's probably because time is a flat circle. But I aim to wake up relatively early. 6:30 a.m. is my target, although I don't always hit it. If coffee's brewing by 9:30, then I'm thrilled. If you thought that was boring, just wait until you read the next paragraph. In the morning, I like to go out on my porch with my dog and work on my novel for an hour, have breakfast with my family, then continue novel writing for another couple hours. Here is a picture of my very cool porch. Be jealous. I've jumped around with schedules. So again, his adjustment is of course going from being full time with a day job to being full time with an author, and there is an adjustment period there because you think, well, the day's just full of hours. So if you're a full time writer, you'll write all the time, but the time has a way of filling itself up. So you always end up doing things that fill the time, and it hardly makes sense to you because you can't figure out where those hours went. But I've worked with a number of different schedules, working in the evenings, working in the mornings. I used to just kind of work all day. My problem with working all day is you sort of have this guilty feeling, like every time you're not writing, you're like, well, I should be writing, instead of like writing for a set amount of time and then having a stopping point where you can go do other things and take care of other responsibilities and that sort of thing, instead of constantly having this nagging feeling on your shoulder that you should be writing. In essence, you end up writing just as much, but you don't end up feeling guilty all that amount of time. But that schedule's changed for me a bunch. Recently, I've had a little more trouble with concentrating, and I've kind of figured out that my morning routine kind of got in the way, and so some things I kind of handle before I sit down at the computer, and once I sit down at the computer, everything else needs to go away while I'm working on writing stuff, and that's helped a little bit. I've also lowered my word minimums, so instead of trying to do 1,000 or 2,000 words on everything, I've pulled the minimum down a lot further than that to about 500 words on each project that I'm looking at. I've limited the number of projects I'm working on at once because I kind of got into a phase where I was really producing, so I was able to work on multiple things at once. But now having all those projects lined up, I'm doing a little bit on everything and not really getting anything done. So I've kind of prioritized, moved some things off to other months, and so even when you make a schedule for yourself and you come up with a pattern, it doesn't necessarily work forever. So I think you kind of have to evolve with how things are working for you. And I imagine that Max will change his schedule a few times here, although he has a pretty good work ethic, so he may stick to his morning schedule. And it sounds like he's getting hours of writing in, which is very good. All right, continuing with this schedule, then I eat lunch. After lunch, I work on publishing related duties as I co-run a small press called Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing with my aforementioned significant other. Her name is Lori Michelle, and she is very cool. I use Lori Michelle for a number of things, including formatting for my books and a whole bunch of other tasks that she's just excellent at and can kind of do with her eyes closed. She's worth every penny I pay her and more. In this article, I am claiming I am now a full-time writer, but in reality, I am more of a full-time writer who also operates his publishing company that publishes other authors too. It's complicated and very, very exhausting. He's always involved in things, so he's got a lot of irons in the fire. But he was like that even when he had a full-time day job. One thing I think is valuable when creating a schedule like this is to make a firm end of day time, and I agree with that very firmly. Otherwise, it's very likely you will start working the moment you wake up and not stop until you go to bed. I say this is valuable, but as of the time I'm writing this article, I have not actually utilized it. That's common too. Despite no longer having a regular job, I'm still constantly behind on deadlines. At night, I try to watch a movie or a couple episodes of something. Plus, I play a lot of cards and dice games with my family during breaks. But other than that, I am pretty much working on something nonstop. I also host 2 podcasts, Ghoulish and Castle Rock Radio, although updates kind of slowed down during the holidays. Podcast work typically happens late at night unless a specific guest prefers an earlier recording time. Still though, it's probably important to put into place an end of day time where you cease working and just effing relax. I am not quite there yet, but it's on my mind, and it should be on yours too. Sometimes we worship the idea of hustling to the point that it feels cult-like. Sometimes it's okay just to sit back and do nothing. We do not exist to work, no matter what kind of work that is. Abolish the mindset that you'll never make it if you don't hustle 24/7. Abolish the concept of making it. Also abolish police while we're at it. And urinals. Why do urinals exist? There is zero reason for urinals to still be here. I appreciate urinals editor. So the editor put an editor's note in there on Max's rant about urinals. There is something, I know he's half joking, but there is something to the idea of setting aside the notion of making it. That idea that, okay, until I get to here, I'm not happy. Until I get to here, I'm not happy. Because I've been full-time since 2013, and I still get these moments where I'm thinking, well, none of this matters, and I'm not accomplishing anything. When in fact, the idea of being a full-time writer for all these years is the dream for a lot of people. And I need to kind of appreciate that. And it's hard to appreciate that when your idea is, well, I need to make $10,000 a month or I'm not making it. I need to have this much money in the bank or I'm not making it. Comes a point where you never get to celebrate your success because you're constantly unsatisfied with where you are. So even though he's kind of half joking, I think he's onto something. That idea of working hard and doing what you need to do, but setting aside time for life, and kind of abolishing these preconceived notions of where success lies, and just constantly making the progress and appreciating where you are. Probably will be better for your mental health, and it'll help you achieve those goals better. I know that a lot of people need sort of that desperate drive, or think they do, in order to keep going. But there is something to be said for kind of appreciating where you are, and not having satisfaction constantly being this thing out in the distance that you can never actually reach. One reason creative types tend to overwork themselves has to do with our inability to stay focused. A lot of us are very scatterbrained and often find ourselves desperately trying to catch up on forgotten deadlines at the last possible moment. We take on too many projects at once and then act surprised when we feel overwhelmed. Very true. I say we here because I am realistically just describing myself and assuming some of you will be able to relate. If you cannot relate, then congratulations on being a perfect human being, and by perfect human being, I literally only mean Michael Shannon. Luckily for you, over the years I've discovered numerous methods for how to stay organized, and all of us can use this, whether we call ourselves writers or not. In our bedroom, I have a desk where I keep my computer, and again, this is Max Booth III talking. It's on one side of the room against the wall, literally within arm's reach of the bed. The room exists simultaneously as a bedroom and an office. I like to call it my boffice. Above my desk on the wall hangs a calendar with every event noted down for the month. Obviously, during COVID times, I am not doing any in-person events, but I am involved in numerous Zoom calls, podcast recordings. I also have a physical event calendar on the corner of my desk where I can go into details about future meetings. Physical calendars and even planners are extremely valuable when trying to stay organized. I think if you want to also mark important events and deadlines on your phone, you should, but also I think it's easier to ignore digital event planners. If you have an actual book on your desk, you will be forced to glance at it once in a while, which will restrict how often you forget things. Sticky notes have also proven useful. Anytime I have a new task that needs to be completed, I write it on a sticky note and slap it somewhere on my desk, or on my desktop, or my actual desk. It's good to have physical reminders staring back at you to say, hey dude, don't forget about this. It's also incredibly cathartic to complete a task and then remove a sticky note, crumble it into a ball, and shoot it into a nearby trash can like a tiny basketball. It's also probably a huge waste of paper. I used to have sticky notes all around the outside of my laptop, all over my desk. I still do. There's still a ton of sticky notes, even though I've moved to other organizers. I'm still a sticky note guy. Before you murder me, I exercise other methods of organization that are not harmful to the environment. Jay Wilburn, that's me, recently wrote an entire LitReactor article on Trello, and I can't recommend it enough. That's very kind of him. I've been using it for a couple years now, but really started taking advantage of it after committing to writing and running PMMP, that's Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, his publishing company, full time. I use two separate Trello accounts, one designed for all Perpetual Motion Machine responsibilities, and the other is reserved for freelance writing, editing, podcasting, and anything else that needs to be accomplished. With the PMMP Trello, I have 12 different lists, each titled a different month of the year. On these lists, I've organized when books are due to be published, but also when things need to be accomplished in order to meet these publication dates. Editing, formatting, cover art, review galleries, interview requests, etc. With my personal Trello, I currently have 8 lists going, titled Miscellaneous, Podcasts, Editing, Freelance, PMMP, Writing, Today, and Done. The reason why I have a PMMP list here too is more to remind myself of upcoming tasks that I personally need to complete in case I neglect to glance at the PMMP Trello. The Today list is something I update before going to sleep, which consists of everything I hope to accomplish the following day, and the Done list is pretty self-explanatory. I admit, much like throwing a sticky note in the trash, it feels pleasant to drag an accomplished goal into the Done list. Trello also rules due to how easily it syncs from the website to various mobile apps it offers, which allows me to keep track of my goals no matter which device is nearest. I use Trello for me personally, and a lot of outside work that it really does help a lot, and especially helps with communicating with other people who are setting deadlines for you. Another fun, eco-friendly organization trick I utilize is the power of spreadsheets. Did I just describe spreadsheets as fun? Yes, but we've been in a pandemic for almost a year now. It no longer takes much for something to seem fun. Spreadsheets are a particularly useful tool for freelance writers in an attempt to stay on track with story submissions. I created spreadsheets for markets currently accepting short stories, one for short stories and articles I'm in the process of writing or plan to be writing soon, and another for short stories and articles I've already submitted, a free version of Duotrope basically. I even color coded them depending on how close the deadline is. Of course, this last thing brings to mind something else pretty important for a new full-time writer getting paid to write. I am not going to pretend like I have any secrets for getting paid. Every successful freelancer pretty much follows the same basic formula. You do your research on markets. If you're doing nonfiction, you figure out how to competently write a pitch. You write fast but avoid sounding sloppy or unprofessional. You hit your deadlines. My editor at LitReactor is currently laughing at this line. Yes, says the editor. Some of the authors or writers at LitReactor kind of have a reputation for getting their stories done at the last minute. I try to get mine done early because I know other people are depending on them, and of course editors really like you a lot more when you turn in your stuff early. So I try to use good and quick as sort of my leverage to make a name for myself places. If you're trying to get an agent, you have to research agents, clients, track record, preferred genres, etc. If you're going with small presses, you have to research small presses. If you're self-publishing, you have to research how to self-publish. There are many different, let me keep that on screen. There are many different kinds of writing. With myself, I'm juggling between screenwriting, novel writing, short story writing, and nonfiction writing. The majority of my nonfiction is for websites like LitReactor, Crime Reads, Film 14, and others. I've developed healthy relationships with some of these websites, and because of that, I can pitch them an idea whenever I want. They do not always accept these pitches, of course, but most of the time I know what kind of article they might be interested in publishing. When I want to write for a new venue, I look over their About Us and Contact Us, and if available, Write For Us page. Usually websites provide plenty of information about how to pitch. I study the kind of content they typically publish and form a pitch I think they might like. With short stories, I either receive an invitation directly from the editor or find potential markets by researching various websites that specialize in submission calls. Back in 2016, I wrote an article for LitReactor about this very topic, so I'm not going to bother repeating myself here. As far as novels and screenplays go, that gets a bit more complicated. I've only sold one screenplay so far, and now I'm working to finish more. I do not know what that journey will look like, but it probably wouldn't be possible without my film and TV manager. When it comes to my novels, that's also tricky. I've published some through other small presses, and I've received some through my own small press. With future books, I'm hoping to sign on with a literary agent, which is something I haven't experienced yet and therefore cannot really offer any advice on. All right. It is difficult to make a living as a writer, and that's true. Quitting your day job seems like a crazy thing to do, but I would not say it's a stupid choice. It's a hell of a gamble, but so are most things. Only you can make the decision if you are going to try this. I hope you keep in mind the realities of what it means. Most of the time, full-time writers are not just working on novels. To make ends meet, a lot of full-timers turn to freelance nonfiction. They spend hours researching items for listicles about topics they couldn't give a single shit about, or they stay up until 2 a.m. writing about what it's like to be a full-time writer as a way to avoid other writing obligations, then gasp when they realize it should have been more, maybe 1,000 words at most, has now exceeded 3,500, and they haven't even proofed or formatted the damn thing. Oh my God, you think I'm so tired. Nobody has ever been as tired as I am right now. which will be a lie because you were certainly more exhausted before when you worked the night shift at a hotel. And you were, without a doubt, more miserable. This is nothing. This is a walk in the park, which is something you can't do right now because people in your conservative town still refuse to wear masks in public. Yes, to be a full time writer means you have to hustle, just like you have to hustle at any damn job. But at the end of the day, that's what it is, a job. Do not forget about your family. Do not forget about yourself. Do not forget to relax once in a while. Drink water, go for a walk, listen to music, contemplate the universe. Then get back to the computer and hit your word count for the day. Excellent article from an excellent author named Max Booth III. The next article we're going to look at is much older. This one was written on February 20th, 2013 by myself. That was less than 2 weeks after I had quit my job as a teacher and become a full-time writer. Max's article that we just read was 4 months after he quit his job as a night auditor and became a full-time writer. There are a few differences between myself and Max. Max is a much more accomplished, much better, much more seasoned author as of the time he's quitting, so he has a much better excuse for doing it. I was fairly green at what I was doing. I really had very little excuse to do it. There were other circumstances that kind of gave me an excuse to make this leap, but I was not the writer that Max was. I'm certainly wasn't the writer that I am now. So my abilities have increased substantially. At this point, I consider Max a much better author than myself, where we are currently in our careers. I know that's self-deprecating, and I'm not trying to just bring myself down. I'm just stating that I sincerely believe that his abilities are very, very well honed. He has some key abilities with story writing that I'm still pursuing. So just very impressed with him all around. So as a point of comparison, let's look at what I wrote in my feelings immediately after. Again, this being less than 2 weeks after I quit my job, my feelings were very raw. I was a very unseasoned writer at that point, and we'll just see how different I think things are now. So I'll kind of review my own thinking at the time compared to where I am now. See, that was 2013, so we're coming up. This will be my 8th year as a full-time writer. So comparing where I was 2 weeks after I quit my day job to 8 years after I quit my day job and have been a full-time writer. Who would be crazy enough to just quit his job and spend his days writing? This guy, sort of. All right. Oh yeah, you read that correctly. On February 7th, 2013, we're coming up on the 8th anniversary of that. I walked into my principal's office and handed her 2 copies of my letter of resignation. Had to hand her 2 copies because one goes to the principal, one goes to the superintendent. This was my 16th year of teaching. That was not the most comfortable thing I have ever done. I felt ill about it for 2 days leading up to acting on this decision. They could have caused trouble for me. They could have delayed the paperwork. They could have withheld my accumulated summer pay for some offense they decided I committed, or they could have taken action against my certificate to foil any future prospects of my return to the classroom. They probably won't. I asked them not to. All right. Again, I was teaching, and so February 7th is obviously the middle of a school year, and so technically I was breaking contract with them, and gave my reasons, which I believe I talk about here in the article, and they let me go without any sort of punishment. My principal was actually exceedingly kind to me when I told her there was no one in the room but me and her. She didn't have to say nice things, but she had very high praise for my work and for the reasons behind my choice. She even told me that my wife was lucky to have me as a husband. I immediately had this quote printed on t-shirts and posters. Money is tight, but I'm springing for a billboard on the highway anyway. My principal is tough, and she runs a strict school for the faculty. She has never said anything but positive things to me directly about my work. It isn't until you tell someone you are quitting on the spot that you get a real chance to see what is what. She told me to keep my certificate up to date and that I should come back when I am ready. So again, very kind. I led off the conversation with this. I'm about to do something terrible to you, and after that I'm going to ask you for a big favor. I I did not give notice. The favor I asked was that she push the paperwork through quickly so I could withdraw my retirement. Now, I guess I am a full time writer. I guess I am a stay at home dad again. I did not regret the year that I did this with my first son. I don't believe I'll regret it now. Most of you probably know this condition as unemployed, but what's in a name really? Well, in this case, I guess a paycheck. Okay, so the first time I stayed home with my first son. We had just moved to South Carolina from Georgia. The teaching jobs weren't coming through at that moment. And so we just made a decision that I would stay home with him. We would save the daycare money, and then she would go back to the job that brought us to South Carolina. I had taken out my retirement from Georgia, and we had that money to live on for a period of time at least. And so that's what we did at that time. And of course, this was the second time I took out my retirement from teaching in South Carolina for the years that I taught. And we had that to live on for a short period of time as I was sort of trying to get my feet under myself. All right, my younger son is having medical issues. These seem to be related to a shadow we found deep down in the white matter of his brain, but no one knows for sure. The medication for this has side effects and that disturb and sadden me. He needs to stop having fevers as often as he does. I'm going to spend a year staying home with him. I'm hoping the combination of my not bringing middle school germs home, I taught middle school, and him not being exposed to daycare germs for a year will get him past this. I hope if I am vigilant that I can make the difference and spare him from some of this. The alternatives are not pleasant, so I will sacrifice for this. We are taking a gamble in more ways than one. We have to thread a needle for any and all of these schemes to work. Again, my son kind of got past the seizures, although he had some not but a couple years ago, maybe about a year and a half ago. So they're still there. I've had seizures and have gone on the medications that I didn't want to put him on while he was still developing. He was only, not even 2 years old at that point, and so we kind of wanted his development to go without being stunted by the seizure medication. I myself, I can feel it all the time. Like even though I'm sitting here and talking, the seizure medications really dull my mind, and it's a real effort to kind of put my sentences together. And I do have moments where I kind of freeze up, where like my mind isn't working and that sort of thing. There are days that I've skipped streams because I just don't have the mental capacity because of all the side effects of medication that I'm on. So I do struggle with that daily. But in my case, it was necessary. In his case, we just kind of have to keep him away from fevers, and hopefully he outgrows this. He's at an age where they try to say it's not the febrile seizures anymore, but he's very small, so we kind of think that maybe some of it may still be related to that, but he hasn't had any for a while, and hopefully that continues. I've used up all my sick days, and my wife can't keep missing work. This will solve that. If she quits her job, there is no retirement money for her to draw. I wasn't going to live until retirement anyway. I'll probably live longer away from public school. I guess that's more true than ever now that COVID's going on. We had used up our sick days because, of course, he was having a lot of seizures, but then I'd gotten sick with something that knocked me out for a few days, and that used up sick days as well, and so we just didn't have any left. We were losing money in our jobs by continuing to work and having to take days off. So it was more advantageous for me to just quit that job. My idea of not living until retirement was that, of course, I had polycystic kidney disease. My kidney function was in decline. This was 2013. By 2016, I was almost in full kidney failure, and then ended up getting transplanted in 2017. So all that was in the future. And like Max had talked about in the previous article, he expected to die behind the desk. I expected to die in the classroom. I just didn't think there was any possibility that I was going to live to retirement. I was just going through the motions until I just died. But of course, life turned out differently, and again, I'll probably live longer away from public school was very, very true. I was a good teacher. I think I was. I have lots of people who would say so. My heart for it was damaged when I attended the funeral of a former student earlier this year. I'd forgotten that was the same year, but yeah, that was terrible. The death was spreading at that funeral, and it settled into my mind and chest. I couldn't seem to shake it. that was very very shaking to me. There are a lot of things I'll miss at least for a year. I think it will be more fun to list the things I will not miss. I will not miss Valentine's dances I was supposed to chaperone. Bad things happen at dances. I will not miss administration telling me my room was too cluttered. I will not miss students threatening to have me fired or threatening for their parents to file suit against me because I told them to follow the rules. I will not miss the disrespect with no consequence. I will not miss the metal detectors. I will not miss standing alone between two students that are trying to fight each other through me. I will not miss calling for assistance and having no one come. I will not miss meetings. I will not miss drills. I will not miss all the ways to get in trouble. I will not miss contradictory instructions. I will not miss grading papers. I will not miss looking at data that has no meaning. I will not miss endless morning duties. I will not miss getting home just in time to put the baby to bed. I will not miss waking up sad and coming home defeated and tired. All that was true. I felt accomplished with teaching at different times, but there was just so much nonsense that went with it that it was hardly worth it. And there's school systems that are good, and there's school systems that treat their teachers badly. I think I was part of a school system that treated teachers badly, and I hate it for the teachers that are having to go through COVID now. Hey man, thanks for jumping in. I hate it for teachers that are still working there that have to deal with COVID and deal with the county that I worked with, because there's just no respect for teachers. Teachers are treated as disposable, and it's never been more clear than watching teachers deal with bureaucracy during a pandemic. They say that they're providing safety and are doing all these things that they aren't actually doing for the teachers and students, and it's a shame. And it's not just the county that I used to teach in. It's a lot of counties all across the country. So again, back to the article that I wrote, less than 2 weeks after I quit teaching. I have 1 year to help my son get through his medical struggles. I have 1 year to make it as a writer. I've calculated how much money buys a year, a month, a week, or a day. Every bit I can save or make buys me time. I'm earning time with my children. I'm earning time onto my dreams. I get to raise my son myself during the day. I get to write during naps and after bed. This is my chance. This is my leap of faith. I need to show how hard I'm working. I'm willing to work because, in essence, this is my job. I can succeed at these tasks, or I can go back to something else. This is my leap. I think at that moment I knew that I was never going back to teaching. I believe I'd kind of, somewhere in my conscious mind, I'd made that decision. The excuse was that when I stayed home with my son to take care of him, and was making a go at being a full-time writer back in 2013, 8 years ago nearly today, that I could go back in a year. But in my mind, I knew there was nothing that was going to make me go back. I think that was kind of a little bit of a surprise to my wife as I was insistent on continuing to work at it. Fortunately, we made it work, and we're in a much better place right now. It's still unsteady money, obviously, but we found ways to make it work, and we've changed our lifestyle in different ways, and it's become something that we're able to make work for nearly a decade now, coming up on that 8th year anniversary. Again, this was 2 weeks after I'd quit, so in my mind, everything was still a blur, and just trying to figure out what the way forward was. I'm going to shoot for 2,000 words a day in fiction. I've done better and worse than that on a lot of days. This is a reasonable goal for me. I use this quota to knock out novels, novellas, and short stories. It is time for me to keep my eye out for paying markets. I'm buying time. In addition, I need to edit and prep work daily, even if I am not submitting daily. I need to promote daily, flesh out new ways to advance my career that you guys haven't tried yet. I want to write a column, review, or blog every other day. I want to read for review every other day at least. With the fiction and columns, I estimate I have over 1 million words in a year's time. I have to be able to make something out of that. So again, not too far off the mark there. Again, some of the things I figured out since I wrote this, I wasn't even thinking about at that time. But being a full-time writer, being any kind of writer, is an active evolution, I think. Brian Keene revealed some gut wrenching numbers about his life as one of the most successful writers in genre work. The margins on success in writing are worse than just thin. I'm determined to make it as a writer anyway. Brian Keene, and again, this is back in 2013, so I guess he had done it somewhere around 2012. He had listed off his actual income as sort of a successful mid-list author, and it was, I think it may have been less than what I was making as a teacher at the time. And again, that's not unusual. It still would be considered wildly successful today, but it kind of showed that like there wasn't this like magic pile of money that was going to fall in on people as they got a little more popular. If I'm staying at home to try to save my son's life in more ways than one, I might as well write. I was worried by my behavior on past off days that I would not feel a sense of urgency to write like I did pecking out words after exhausting days of teaching. No sense of urgency, my lord, people. I feel the urgency. I have to start every morning and end every night calming myself down. I lie to myself and tell myself everything is going to be okay. What the hell do I know about okay? I taught public school. I'm used to lying for the greater good. I'm a fiction writer. I lie for cents per word. I'm a horror writer. I tell scary lies. I'm a stay-at-home dad again. I believe it to be true when I lay my sons down and tell them that I will do everything I can to make it okay, even if it means giving up my career and burning off my retirement to make it happen. I will be here to see that it is okay, and I believe God makes it okay, even when it is not. I still believe that too. I think you believe what you want. I quit my job to be full-time care for my son and to write horror stories. This is my first column in my year as a full-time writer. These are my first 1,487 words in a year of 1,000,000 words. My son had no seizures today. My son woke up multiple times during the night, and it is my job to get up with him since my wife has one of those day jobs I hear so much about. I did not get a full night's sleep, and I was tired this morning, but I woke up happy for the first time in as long as I can remember. What did you do? So again, I have not looked at that again recently, but thought it would be fun to kind of look at it live and see where I was. There's a lot of things I've learned in the last 8 years, a lot of things that are different in my mindset and just in how writing works from 2013 to now. Much wiser. I have a much broader range of skills. I'm a much better writer than I was back then. The guy who quit his job in 2013 had very few of the skills that he needed at that point to make it work. So it was a work in progress to learn what to do.